Mr. President, earlier this month we commemorated the 50th anniversary of President Johnson's declaration of unconditional war on poverty. That war on poverty was a massively successful initiative, helped tens of millions of Americans lift themselves out of poverty, reduced hardship, empowered people to build new opportunities for themselves and their future. And we see some of the residue of this. Today, food stamps ensure that children don't go to bed hungry at night. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act insists that all children, regardless of background, can learn and have an equal opportunity for education. Legal services help people with limited resources seek protection from exploitation. Low-income families fight poverty in their own communities by helping to lead community action agencies. The war on poverty and the Great Society encompassed a tremendous list of achievements that I can't even begin to do justice to today. However, we know we still have more work to do. Too many of those successful programs and policies have been reduced or rolled back under subsequent presidents and Congresses. What's more, our economy has changed in fundamental ways, with decades of wage stagnation and rising income inequality. So now we must urgently return our attention to policies that will ensure that working families can still get ahead in America. We must recognize that tens of millions of working Americans struggle to put food on the table, a roof over their head, pay their bills every month. This is a fundamental failing of our economy. It's something that we not only have a moral obligation to fix, but we have the ability to fix it. We can do so first by raising the minimum wage, one of our nation's simplest and most effective means of lifting working families out of poverty. I am so pleased that President Obama has taken the first step in this effort. Last night at the State of the Union, he announced that he would issue an executive order that will require future federal contracts to provide wages of at least $10.10 an hour to our nation's contract workers for the federal government. I applaud President Obama's bold step to ensure that the federal government is a leader in promoting good jobs that pay fair wages. I think most Americans would agree that taxpayer dollars should not support companies that pay poverty wages. This executive order is a strong step in the right direction. But now we in the Congress have work to do to raise the minimum wage for the rest of American workers. And again, I am so grateful for President Obama taking a strong leadership position, as he did last night, in calling for Congress to expeditiously work to increase the minimum wage. You know, we used to agree in this country that if you worked hard and played by the rules, you could earn enough money to support your family and keep a roof over your head, put some money away for a rainy day, have a secure retirement. The minimum wage played a critical role in doing that, which is why presidents and elected leaders from both parties in the past have supported fair increases in the minimum wage. From time to time, we adjusted the minimum wage on a bipartisan basis to help working families keep up with inflation and the changing economy. But recently, we've heard a new and disturbing set of talking points from our friends on the other side of the aisle. They claim that raising the minimum wage doesn't actually reduce poverty. They argue that the minimum wage workers don't really come from poor families, or that no one stays in a minimum wage job long enough to be trapped in poverty. Well, those all sound good on the talk shows, but the facts simply prove that those statements are not true. The fact is, a majority of people who would benefit from an increase in the minimum wage come from low-income households. Many of them have been trapped in jobs at or near the minimum wage for years and years at a time. Indeed, when you listen more closely, the offensive underlying premise of all these arguments is that anyone can rise out of poverty if they just work harder. Tell that to Nereda Castro of Des Moines. She and her husband both work minimum wage jobs in the fast food and construction industries. They have 5 children to support. But Nareda says they live day to day because of their bills and expenses. She says her family has to limit so many things to give to our kids, not only to make rent, but to cover basic expenses. We have to limit everything. A raise, she said, in the minimum wage would allow her to, quote, live a life where I don't feel like I'm drowning. Or tell that tale about, well, you just got to work harder, to Nancy Salgado, a 27-year-old single mother with 2 kids, ages 2 and 7. She's worked at McDonald's for the past 10 years, but makes just $8.25 an hour. That's the minimum wage in her home state of Illinois. She struggles to be able to pay for necessities such as milk and shoes for her kids. She recently confronted the president of McDonald's USA saying, quote, I'm a single mother of 2. It's really hard for me to feed my 2 kids and struggle day to day. Do you think this is fair that I have to be making $8.25 an hour when I've been working at McDonald's for 10 years? Well, for senators and representatives sitting comfortably here in Washington to preach to working mothers like Nancy, struggling hard to get ahead, working 10 years at McDonald's, to tell them they're just not working hard enough, that is just beyond offensive. Now, no one disputes that hard work is a big part of the path out of poverty, but you also need a basic foundation of economic security to start building that better life. How are you supposed to pay for a community college course on $7.25 an hour? How are you supposed to find a better job when you're standing in line at a food bank because your wages won't cover all your household expenses, and neither will your food stamps? How are you supposed to build a better life for your kids when you can't even find them safe child care while you're at work? You just can't get ahead if your job traps you in poverty. Well, it hasn't always been this way. We used to agree that minimum wage workers, people who perform some of the most difficult and essential jobs in our society, should not have to live in poverty. The minimum wage kept families above poverty line in the 1960s and 70s. In today's dollars, a minimum wage worker in 1968, when the minimum wage was 120% of the poverty line, the worker took home $10.71 an hour in today's dollars, or $22,000 a year working full time. But since the 80s, since starting right in here, just about in here, the minimum wage has not kept up. And today, the minimum wage is about 80% of the level of poverty. So this is how far we've come down. Same family, working minimum wage in 1968, look at where they are today, way below the poverty line. It's no wonder that working people have to turn to the safety net for food stamps and all other kinds of things just to help them get by. Well, a recent study found that our taxpayers have to pick up the tab for millions of working families to the tune of about $240 billion a year. Food stamps, Medicaid CHIP, earned income tax credit, temporary assistance to needy families. Now, I want to make it clear, these are not people sitting at home watching TV. These are people who work, but they're making minimum wage. We're picking up the tab, $240 billion a year. That's what our taxpayers are doing. But what we want and what they want is not to have the government and taxpayers pick up the tab. They want to be able to support themselves with the jobs that they have. So we have to rectify this. My legislation, the Minimum Wage Fairness Act, introduced along with Majority Leader Reid here, Congressman George Miller on the House side, will raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour in 3 annual steps. And we'll get it above the poverty line by 2016 for the first time in over 20 years. So that's really what we're talking about, is getting this minimum wage up. I I look forward to working with my colleagues here in the Senate on both sides of the aisle sometime soon to bring this bill forward. And I hope that we can do it on a bipartisan basis and recognize that it is indeed time to get families, working families, out of poverty by paying them a decent minimum wage in this country. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Thank you.